Most of the greatest inventions in history came from years of planning, decades of research, thousands of failed experiments before the breakthrough. And then there are these four. None of them were planned. None of them were even close to what the person was working on. Every single one happened because something went wrong, something was forgotten, or someone reached into the wrong box. These are four of the most important accidental inventions in human history. Penicillin. In 1928, Alexander Fleming went on vacation and left his lab a complete mess. Dirty petri dishes stacked everywhere. Bacteria cultures left out in the open. Any other scientist would have thrown them away immediately. Fleming didn't. And when he came back, one of those dishes had something growing on it that had no business being there. A strange blue-green mold. But something was off. Everything around the mold was dead. The bacteria that had been filling that dish completely gone. Like the mold had put up a wall and killed everything near it. Fleming had no idea what he was looking at. He almost discarded the dish 3 times. Instead, he isolated the mold and spent weeks trying to understand what it was doing. The mold was producing something that destroyed bacteria on contact. He named it penicillin. Nobody cared. Fleming published his findings in 1929 and the scientific community ignored him almost entirely. Every time he tried to purify it, it broke down. After years of failed attempts, he gave up. The discovery sat in a journal for 11 years, unread, collecting dust. Then World War II started. Soldiers were dying not from bullets, but from infected wounds. A simple cut would kill a man in days. The military desperately needed something that could stop bacterial infections fast. 2 scientists, Howard Florey and Ernst Chain, dug up Fleming's old paper and spent years figuring out how to stabilize and mass-produce penicillin. By D-Day in 1944, enough had been produced to treat every Allied wounded soldier. Fleming, Florey and Chain shared the Nobel Prize in 1945. Fleming was clear about what had actually happened. He said he did nothing remarkable. The mold did it. He just didn't throw the dish away. Today the number is estimated at over 200 million lives saved. X-ray. In 1895, Wilhelm Röntgen was running an experiment he had done dozens of times before. Cathode rays fired through a vacuum tube. Routine, nothing new. He wasn't expecting to find anything. But a fluorescent screen sitting on a bench across the room, one he wasn't even using that day, was suddenly glowing. The tube was covered. The room was completely dark. There was no way any light from the experiment should have reached that screen, but it was glowing anyway. And every time he switched the machine off, it stopped. Röntgen had absolutely no idea what was causing it. He spent the next 6 weeks locked in his lab, barely sleeping, barely eating, telling nobody what he was working on. He was terrified of being wrong and becoming a laughingstock. He called the mysterious ray an X-ray, X for unknown, because he genuinely didn't know what it was. Then he put his wife's hand between the tube and a photographic plate and switched it on. The image that came out showed her bones, her flesh completely invisible, her skeleton and her wedding ring perfectly clear on the plate. She stared at it for a long time. Then she said, "I have seen my own death." Röntgen published his findings in December 1895. Within weeks, newspapers across Europe were calling it a miracle. Within a year, hospitals had X-ray machines. Doctors could suddenly see inside a living human body without cutting it open, something that had been completely impossible for the entire history of medicine up to that point. He won the very first Nobel Prize in Physics in 1901. He refused to patent the discovery, saying it should belong to everyone. All of it started because a screen glowed when it had absolutely no reason to. Microwave. In 1945, an engineer named Percy Spencer was testing a new military radar system. He was standing in front of a magnetron, a device that generates microwave radiation, when he reached into his pocket for a snack. His chocolate bar had completely melted. Spencer had worked around magnetrons for years, so had every other engineer in that building. It had happened to other people before, and every single one of them had just assumed it was body heat and moved on. Spencer didn't move on. He went and grabbed a bag of popcorn kernels and held them near the magnetron. They started popping within seconds. The next morning, he brought in a raw egg and placed it near the device. It exploded in a colleague's face before he could even finish the experiment. Spencer worked at Raytheon, a military defense contractor. He brought his findings to the company's leadership that same week. Within months, Raytheon had filed a patent for a cooking device that used microwave radiation. The first commercial model launched in 1947. It stood nearly 6 feet tall, weighed 750 pounds, and cost the equivalent of $56,000 in today's money. It was sold exclusively to restaurants and large institutions. No ordinary person could afford one or fit one in their home. 20 years later, it finally fit in a home. Today, there are over 1 billion microwave ovens on Earth, more than one for every 7 people alive. Pacemaker. In 1956, an electrical engineer named Wilson Greatbatch was building a device to record hard sounds. He reached into a box of resistors and grabbed the wrong one. Wrong size. He almost put it back, but he was in the middle of something and couldn't be bothered. He installed it anyway and switched the circuit on. It pulsed, not randomly, not erratically, at almost the exact same rhythm as a human heart. Greatbatch stared at it for a long moment. He sat back and said, "This is going to save lives." At the time, thousands of people died every year from irregular heartbeats. Doctors knew it was fixable. Nobody could figure out how. Greatbatch quit what he was working on and spent the next 2 years doing nothing but building a version small enough to implant inside a human chest. He built 50 prototypes. Most failed. He kept going. In 1958, the first implantable pacemaker was placed inside a patient. It kept his heart beating in perfect rhythm. He lived for another 18 months before the device's battery ran out, at which point a second one was implanted and kept him alive for another decade. Today, over 600,000 pacemakers are implanted every single year. Right now, more than 3 million people walking around on this planet have one, keeping their heart in rhythm. None of these people were trying to change the world. They just paid attention when something unexpected happened. Which makes you wonder how many discoveries are sitting in front of us right now, waiting for someone to not look away.